This is Andrea Huspeni, and I am the Special Projects Director at entrepreneur.com. Today on our Facebook Live, I'm super excited to have Dave Farrow of Farrow marketing firm Farrow Communications, but he is also a Guinness Book record holder for greatest memory, which is amazing. He's going to be talking to us today about how to improve your memory for your personal and business life. Dave, I can't tell you how excited I'm to have you because I have a horrible, horrible memory. I can't remember anything, so I'm looking forward to getting some of your tips.
The best advice I could give to anybody who's younger is pick a goal that you think is way beyond you.
Yeah.
And even if you fail at it, you're going to be transformed even in the attempt, you know? But the fact that I succeeded, it caused my business to launch. I was able to get publicity and have a best-selling books and everything.
So I want to hear about how being a record holder opened doors for you.
Yeah,
because you were a best-selling author.
Yeah.
Explain a little bit about that.
The thing is, I thought of it originally. It was a publicity stunt. I thought,
and it worked.
But a lot of people think you get in the Guinness Book of Records and somebody shows up to your front door with like $5,000 cash and say, "Hey, you've won," and it's like the lottery. But that didn't happen. Actually, I realized that I didn't really have a good product then. I didn't really have much of a business. I just thought, oh, I'll get this Guinness record and the world will be past my door, and that's not the way it works. But it does give you one cornerstone, I think, like a leg on the table of a really good business, especially a business based on expertise, which mine is. It gives you credibility, and it's third-party verification of your credibility, right? So if I'm coming in saying I can improve your memory, what proof do I have, right? Now I have
you
this
could be like,
Guinness
hello.
record. Exactly. And
do you have to naturally be born with a good memory?
Yeah, actually, I struggled in school. Now I have been tested. I do have a high IQ. I'm not pretending that it changes everything.
Right.
But I do have mild dyslexia, which really was difficult in school. I have a hearing problem as well, which made things difficult. And I also was diagnosed with ADHD when I was like 14.
Yeah.
But of course, I mean, everybody was diagnosed with ADHD at some point. It suffice to say that it was a struggle for me to reach what I thought my potential was. I kept on underperforming. So I looked into memory techniques and different tricks. I looked into everything. And in those days, it was like I'm 44 now, so it's like that was like back when they called it neurology, not even neuroscience, but it was like early stages, and I looked into everything I could about mentalism. And then I started developing my own techniques, and that's when things really took off. I knew I had something when I was able to, when I actually was told, this was back in high school, but I was given a detention because I did too well on a test. The teacher assumed I was cheating, even though they couldn't prove it. I did 100% on a very tough, technical test, which is about computers, which is like nothing that you need to know today. It was completely useless, but it was one of those interesting things. So I was not born with it, but it is.
But how do you do that? Like, I'm meeting like 10 people at a thing. Like, what do I do like visually? Do I think of like just a visual image?
Well, yeah,
I don't know what to do.
A couple things that you do to start off with, you gotta
like if
walk.
I'm meeting you first.
Yeah, you gotta walk before you can run.
Okay.
So usually you start with first names, right?
Yep.
So my name's Dave, so you think of a wave or something, or a cave or something like that.
So it's always visual. Like
yeah,
you
it's always visual.
like, so I think of you, when I see you, I think a cave.
Now the other thing though is you have to connect it to either the person or what they do.
Yeah.
Right. So and even something like a deepa, that sounds very, very difficult to. Well, actually, the word deep, I just think of an underwater diver.
Yeah.
And then I always have something for that syllable, right?
Yep.
So I have something for every, but just because I've practiced and I've heard a lot of names. So one of the things you can do with this technique, of course, take a course on it to be proper about it, but don't expect to be perfect in the beginning. What I tell people to do is, if you're going into a business meeting, you can go to the website and you can look at some people's names, make links for them ahead of time. Then when you meet them, you can connect it to their face. The key to connecting to their face is to pick a distinguishing feature. Usually it's the first thing that pops up in your head. So for you, I would think of your hair.
Yeah.
It's a very really tight curl hair. It's not very common. Boom, instantly, that's what I would associate it to. So I would imagine like a painting, kind of stuck to your hair or like pinned to your hair, that sort of thing. And as silly as it sounds, as weird as it sounds, that is how our brain actually works. You know, we want to live in a world where our brain will work if we use repetition or we stress out about something, but our brain does not memorize using those methods. Those are the least efficient ways to do it. Your brain really works when something visual sticks in your mind. Think of a trailer you saw for a movie or a commercial or a logo or anything that's stuck in your mind, a YouTube video or someone falls over on a bike or something. All of these things are usually visual, but they also involve your other senses, so people who are not highly visual can still do it. But it's something that stands out and that is different, you know? And then that sticks in the mind much more than just, you know, another Dave in the crowd.
That's crazy. So if I was to see you, okay, so I would think of, I would think of wave, and then you have blue eyes, so would I stick the blue eye, or would
and actually your natural instinct is actually the first mistake that people make, is you're trying to make a logical association. The funny thing is that what we know from neuroscience is that people who are more creative and less logical actually usually score better on natural memory tests. And it's really surprising.
I could see that.
But if you think of it, like a logical person is good at classifying and organizing. A creative person is good at kind of being imaginative and creative and coming up with a new association. So the toughest things to memorize are things that don't naturally come up. You know, like numbers and names and formulas and things like, there's no logical way. So when you're looking for blue eyes, that's your logical brain. What you want to do is find something crazy, like a wave knocking me over, you know, or something like that. Actually, we got one much better that worked out really well.
Explain this, totally.
Yeah, so you may or may not know this, but I have an international bestseller called the Farrow Method. It teaches people how to improve their memory. And the way that I got people to remember my name was a rather cheesy thing that worked really well, is I created like a logo of a pharaoh symbol. Now, obviously, I am not Egyptian. I'm not trying to appropriate any Egyptian culture or anything. But once I show that, and also I had a really cheesy picture of me in a pharaoh hat on the cover. Oh my God, it was terrible. I'm not going to show that too closely. But people, it was great with students because we were trying to get younger people and everything. And once they heard that, they could never forget Farrow. So the thing is, if I walked in here wearing a Farrow costume, you'd never forget that. It'd be entirely inappropriate, but you'd never forget it, right? So the same thing is true with like the Geico gecko, the Aflac duck. You know, like with Geico, it's a perfect example. It actually stands for Government Employee Insurance Corporation. It's an acronym. So they couldn't figure out how to market it, so they went with a gecko because it sounded similar. It was one of the best marketing strategies in history. The Aflac duck is a case study in mnemonics because well, they essentially, to kind of simplify the whole process over a number of years, Aflac, it's basically a medical insurance company. They were really struggling, so they came up with, they wanted a mascot, and they went up with this Aflac duck that had like a really annoying voice and everything going Aflac, Aflac, right? But their sales skyrocketed. People remembered the name when they were searching for that product. It was top of mind again and again and again. But the CEO at one point, several years into the success, and they were like doubling and tripling what the competition was doing. The CEO thought it made them look silly, so it got rid of the duck. And their sales just tanked. If you remember, there was like 2 or 3 years where the duck was not around.
I forgot what they exchanged
or
put
I mean, it was like Aflac, the company you trust type thing. And the problem is, it's the same thing that State Farm is doing today. If State
Farm is a great one too.
Yeah, but if State Farm went with a pig or something, they would have been right neck and neck with Geico. They would double their sales. And it's all about, when I think of insurance, what's the first thing to pop into my mind? And my mind works with creative pictures and images. So anyway, so the long story short, they got rid of the CEO at Aflac, and the new guy came in and said, we're the duck company. Yeah, we're bringing it back.
That's amazing.
And their sales went back up. So obviously, you've got to be tasteful. I run a PR and marketing firm.
I like this one too.
This is kind of cheesy for a PR and marketing firm. So here's the logo we went with this. Now you might think, what the heck is that? But if you look at the F with the arrow, and it's Farrow, immediately there's that aha moment, and it sticks in people's mind. Yeah, exactly. And people can do that. I've taught people to do that with their own name. You know, like I had a
business name, their own company name.
Even just personally, like when you're networking, come up with a little way that makes it easier for people to remember your name. Like I have a student of mine. Her name is Sylvia, and she has like a southern accent, so I can't reproduce it, but she'll shake someone's hand and she goes, "Just think of silver because I'm so precious," and she pulls it off. You know?
Yeah, because I'm with the Southern accent.
And so you can kind of like give people a hint, and then it becomes a conversation starter. And these little tricks.
I bet you that would work. I mean, I don't know what I would say for mine, but
She is the only person in the networking room that everybody remembers her name and everybody forgets everyone else's. So Pepsi probably did really well in its market share against Coke by making more of a symbol. You know?
With the red and the blue.
Right,
and the white.
Yeah,
it's kind of patriotic.
Yeah, and then they got a lot of celebrities and they connected, but they always had people drinking the product, showing the product, and everything. There's a lot of times where I think people, Apple's a great example. Apple's probably one of the best modern examples of like a symbol, obviously tasteful, most valuable company in the world, and it's just that one symbol, and then all of their products have it. All of it kind of comes back to that, and that sticks in the mind.
Okay, so, and I don't know if there's different techniques for this. I was talking about like networking and like how, you network and people can remember your name and you can remember other people's names. If you're doing a presentation and you have tons of material and you have like a presentation and you don't want to like have so many notes, is it the same technique where you you put, I don't know.
Yeah, no, this is a really good one actually, because as you probably know, I do keynote talks on memory, and a lot of times I'm teaching salespeople. So I'll go to like a sales conference, teach the salespeople how to remember names, and we do a fun like interactive team building exercise and everything. But the biggest mistake that speakers make is they read off of their PowerPoint.
I know.
So what you can do is, just like I linked Farrow to my face, or the Andrea thing of drawing, you can link a key word on your next slide. So let's say we were talking about Apple. So let's say the next slide has Apple on it. You can link that. You can link that to what's currently on the slide right now.
How?
You want to imagine something crazy. You've got to get creative. So if you have, I don't know, just off the top of my head, if you have like pens on the screen and you're talking about pens and you say, hey, we should sell pens like Apple. I'm just making this up. But your slide has pens and the next slide has apples on it. Then I would imagine like jabbing an apple with a pen. Then when I have the pen slide up there, that silly picture pops into my head and I remember the next slide is Apple, and I can say, and you'll never guess what we should do next. It's Apple. Click, and then you look like you know what you're talking about, because you're not going click and then reading it. It's
because that kind of breaks the interaction engagement with the audience when you're like stop and go. And you think that technique works better than repetition and trying to memorize?
Well, the problem with repetition is you can't really remember in and out of order like this, for example.
No.
So like try to say your alphabet backwards.
Yeah. That's
like even trying saying it without singing. You get to people and they go A, B, C, D, E, F. Like you can't. So the repetition only gets you to recall things exactly the same way, in the same order. You can't go backwards in and over. So it's very limited, but also it's very time consuming, and also what happens is your brain tends to mash things together. The one thing I've really learned, if I would kind of distill this down over the years, is that I never, when I was a kid, I never realized how much business is a performance.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah.
And these techniques, they come from mentalism. Like I wanted to, do better in school. That was my selfish desire to learn it and master it. But it's not just that you remember one person's name or one thing here. It's that the total picture is a performance of people trust you, people think you're smart, they want to work with smart people, and I've gotten a lot of business just from that, from doing performing.
That's crazy.
And I think, like you said, if you're doing a presentation, every single day you show up at work, you're performing, and how you perform will affect how other people see you.
No, definitely. And I think that like having that visualization offers more flexibility, because before we started, I was like telling you, I was like, I need to memorize this, and you were like, maybe we should add this, and I was like, no, we cannot add anything, because
can't change anything.
We'll throw it off. But to your point, it's like if I wouldn't have been so concerned about the rigidness of being repetitive and memorizing and maybe using your other technique, then it allows for that flexibility of like, okay, I can go with that a little bit more.
Also, we need to cut people some slack sometimes, because you're allowed to have a bad day. You're allowed, don't try to be perfect all the time.
Right.
But when you can impress somebody, then you're much more likely to get that next gig and get that job.
Right. And I think we touched on this before, but like when someone like me has a horrible memory, how you make yourself memorable is the big tip is to make it easy for people to remember you by saying, think of me when you think. Okay.
Yeah. So if you have a very difficult sounding name, then that's fine. You don't have to force them to remember that if they remember where you met them or what you do.
Yeah.
So if you're known of as special projects, at Entrepreneur, then they might not always remember your name, but they'll still be able to find you in their emails and things like that. So sometimes it's not name recognition, but I do got to tell you, it's a lot of people who come to me. They're people who have non-Anglo-Saxon names, complex names from other language groups and everything, and they see more than anybody how much name recognition really matters. I know several people who are immigrants or second generation, but they had a name that, and it's not even a racial thing, at least not from what they tell me.
It's just hard to remember.
It was just, they're just not remembered as much, so they go with, it's like, Bruce Lee is a great example,
Yeah.
He wasn't born Bruce,
Yeah,
but he's like, so like making something easy to remember, is a very powerful tool.
So you are a Guinness record holder, which I think is super cool, and we've seen that in action. But I'm guessing, Guinness isn't paying you every single day for being a record holder. So I know you have the marketing firm Farrow Communications. How are you using the power of memory and brain science at that place?
Absolutely. Well. Mostly what we do at Farrow Communications, we build websites for people who do branding, of course. One of the main things they come to us for is to get them publicity, to do PR and marketing, and also to handle their social media.
Cool.
In all of these cases, we've had a lot of really creative ways to get them to stand out in the consumer's mind.
How though? Because how are you not another marketing firm? How are you using the brain science?
Well, I'll tell you, if you just try to push your story, you'll only get so far.
Yeah.
Right? But if you tap into a bigger story, then you will ride along with that story. So one of the, and this is really similar to the memory technique where you already know what an Egyptian pharaoh is. You don't know me, but I'm connecting to that. And remember, we already know what a gecko is, so you're connecting to that. So you're connecting to something the consumer already knows.
Gotcha.
So what we do is we try to pitch the story, and then we make the guest come along for the ride. So I did it with myself. I've done it with a lot of clients, but a couple examples for me. I can get in the news as the Guinness record holder a couple of times, but every summertime we're talking about how students lose grade point average over the summer. We're doing stories on that. Every back to school time we're talking about how students can get started in the right track in school. Every Valentine's Day I'm talking about being memorable to your date.
Yes.
Every New Year's. So we do hooks at different times of year.
Smart.
I actually did one where we tapped into a lot of like presidential stuff. So like when presidents like when Rick Perry and also a couple of other people forgot points that they were trying to make. I was on the news like the next day talking about memory because you want to connect to that bigger thing. So that's also a memory technique. People will remember me because I'm connecting to something else that you already know or remember. In fact, this is something I can't take credit for. It actually goes back to Socrates. He's accredited with saying this, that in order to remember any new thing, you have to connect it to something you already know or remember. So if your product is in a vacuum, not connected to anything, then it's really hard for people to understand it.
Yep.
So
they have to associate it with something they already know. In PR, how do you coach guests to do interviews in a way that helps them be remembered? And this can be for anyone, not just PR. Just like if I'm doing an interview at work, how can you coach so the person remembers me and hires me?
I think people they have the wrong focus when they're doing their interviews. Most people are afraid of looking dumb, being embarrassed, looking like an idiot, and if that's what you're thinking of, it's like that's what you're staring at and moving towards,
Right.
So I actually suggest take risks and be vulnerable. The interesting thing is there's an inverse relationship to people who are a bit more honest and a bit more forthright in interviews, and how much they're respected. I mean, just think of some presidential candidates or people in politics,
Yeah.
whenever they gave an answer that was really sounded polished and clean and everything, you just didn't believe them.
Nope.
I won't talk about politics anymore because it's a mess. but in general, when you have an overly polished message, people believe it less and they feel less connected. So and it's a tough thing to do in your corporation because you don't want to be unpolished. You don't want to appear uncouth. But there's been some great companies have done this. There was a great campaign by Best Buy where people they gave customer service over Twitter. And they gave real answers to questions over Twitter, and that was great. There's a bunch of examples I could give if I was just talking about individual industries.
Right.
I remember one time there was a great thing about Wendy's. Wendy's did this one thing over Twitter where someone dissed them or something, and they responded by saying, well, that's actually not our product. You're thinking of McDonald's. And then they tried to cover themselves. They said, oh, it's okay. You just mistook us for that and everything. They handled it really cool. But it was like little risks like that. They got in. You can look it up. The Wendy's Twitter thing. They got tons of PR over that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're just doing the corporate line and you're just playing it safe, you're not going to be remembered, especially in today's day and age where everybody expects there are no personal lines anymore.
Yep.
So the rules have been changed. So
it's like being more authentic, being more yourself, but understanding you're in a professional environment, but not being okay, or being okay to be a little bit more candid.
A little bit more candid, but the thing is, you prepare ahead of time, so obviously you're not being inappropriate. You don't want to, you don't want to go down that road because you can't go back from that, right? But being more candid, so you can prepare ahead of time about what is our honest take on this, what are we trying to do, and then you can kind of dolly back and say what do I want to tell people. The other thing I'll tell them during interviews that really helped me succeed a lot was focusing on the why, the emotional hot buttons that your customer has. So talk less about what you do and talk more about what the customer needs. Mm-hmm. And so in my case, I was teaching memory techniques, so I would be talking to parents and I would be saying, hey, parents, if you have a child who is doing well and now they're falling behind, you're probably scared. And it's true. Yeah. It's like, oh, my child was doing so well, and now they're falling behind. They're capable of A's and B's, but they're getting C's, maybe D's, and everything. So like I would really talk, it hit home with it instead of just trying to be an infomercial and say, oh, you can do this and you can do that. It's just being real. But that's what people really, really care about. Yeah. And so if you can find the emotion behind anything, what is the major hurt? And then say, hey, we're trying to address that. We're working on that. That's why I got and when I talk to an author, one of our most common clients is authors. Somebody who writes a book and wants to get publicity. We're a very, very affordable, effective way to get bookings for them. So when they're doing their interview, they wanted to stick to these polished points. And I tell them, like, why did you write the book? Aside from you want to be an international bestseller, but like, what was the real hurt? What was the real thing? And then they say, oh, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, or I did this, and it's like, that's the story you have to tell. When you get that emotion, that's memory. Yeah, exactly.
So my last question is, how do you exercise? Like, how can people exercise their brain to get better and better?
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some tips?
Yeah, so some of the things I was saying today, about turning a name into something you can visualize and then doing different visual association. I suggest doing that a little bit each day. Every morning, do it a little bit each day because you're not going to be able to do it in public until you do quite a bit of practice. Yeah. Expect to be worse in front of people than you are in practice. That's the biggest thing. And there's actually a scientific reason for this. Cortisol, the stress hormone that's released, it actually directly interferes with our synapses, our abilities to form and recall connections. So that's the phenomenon you have when you know something, you know it, oh, I know that person's name. When they're in front of you, you don't remember it. They walk away. 5 seconds later, it pops into your head, right? Yeah, totally. So actually, I'll tell you a couple of tips because I want to leave with a few tips here. If you're blanking out and it's stress related, it's that cortisol flowing through your system, there's a couple things you can do that are really simple. I got a great YouTube video on this, and I love when people really get this. Sure. So stop for a moment and have a deep breath. Because usually when we're stressed, we're breathing through our shoulder, we're like, right? And we gotta breathe through our stomachs and have a deep breath. And the second thing you can do is look up. literally look up like this and think about it for a few seconds. Give yourself a couple of deep breaths to go, oh, what was their name? And more often than not, it'll pop into your head. And the reason is, behind our eyeball, there's a large bundle of nerves called the optic nerve. It's larger than a golf ball. And it essentially, what we know, and we don't really know why this is, but we know is the physical direction you point your eyes actually helps direct energy right into the brain. So when you look down, that's what you do when you're depressed, when you're talking to yourself, when you're trying to calm down, you know? You're like, oh man, I hope they like me. What am I doing, right? Like that sort of thing. So when you start to get stressed out, you go, oh, what's their name? What's their name? Totally. You need to stop, look up and go, hey, I wonder what's their name, right? And face it with a more of a curiosity than fear.
Than failure.
And if you can get into that space, you're going to double your recall for names just from that alone.
Well, we got one more. Who's the one more?
Oh, I forgot it all.
One more from
all right.
entrepreneur.com. Who's the special projects director?
Special projects director. Oh, geez, I don't know. Is it Andrea Huspeni?
Yes. Oh my God. Well, we'll just wrap on that note. Thank you, Dave, so much for having us. I'm so excited. You have so much information. Here is your instant speed reading and the Farrow method.
Well, those are our course. This is the I sold a lot of DVDs, but right now our course is all 100% digital.
Digital?
So yeah, that's you're getting
that's
some.
Me.
Yeah, I've got
DVDs.
some. I had an infomercial for a number of years, but if people still want the DVDs, they can contact us. But it's kind of an old medium, so we have everything online.
Where can they go for
this?
Actually,
you can go to, I don't know if you can see this, but FarrowMemory.com.
FarrowMemory.com.
Yeah, and also for Farrow Communications, I do for people who are qualified, I do free consultation.
Oh, cool.
So if people want to pick my brain literally about their marketing idea, it's one of the things I love more than anything is the mental challenge of taking a new product and figuring out where they're just not connecting to the customer. It's a lot of fun.
So Farrow Communications and Farrow Memory. Thank you, Dave, so much for being with us, and thanks for remembering all our names.
Well, hey, don't forget me. I won't forget you guys.
I won't. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
It's been a pleasure.